Hey, it's Roger. I'm back. And this is the final video for the Azure SQL Database configuration in the Azure Sandbox, or otherwise known as MSSQL for short. And we're doing a quick code walkthrough of the automation that's included in this configuration. So we went over Bootstrap previously. Let's go and have a look at all the different Azure SQL Database resources that are provisioned as part of this configuration. So that's here in 020 mssql.tf. So the first thing you'll see here is I generate a random unique name for the Azure SQL Database logical server. That does need to be globally unique because we have to create a fully qualified domain name around that. And then this next resource is the Azure SQL Database logical server. So pretty straightforward. You give it a name. You define the resource group and the region, the version, and then the value that you want to use for your administrator login and password, which we're getting from Key Vault. The minimum TLS version supported by the server, whether or not you want to enable public network access, and then you can apply some tags as well. So that's pretty straightforward for the Azure SQL Database logical server. So this next resource is the database itself. We basically reference the previous Azure SQL Database logical server here, and we give this one a name. We define the licensing model to be used, and then we can tag it as well. So that's very, very straightforward. So once those two resources are provisioned, we'll have a logical server, and then we'll have a test database associated with that logical server. Now we deal with the private endpoints. So in this section, we create the private endpoint. So we give it a name, a resource group, and a location. We drop it in a specific subnet, which is that private link subnet that was provisioned in VNet app. And we specify the type of private link endpoint that it is. It's one that points to an Azure SQL Database logical server. These are, once we define these properties, we can create the private endpoint. And here we define the A record, which we add to our private DNS zone so that our DNS queries to our private endpoint work correctly. And we demonstrated that earlier in smoke testing. So the private DNS zone is already linked to the application virtual network. So, all we need to do is make sure that we have an A record for each of our Azure SQL Database logical servers here to ensure that our DNS queries resolve correctly when talking to Azure SQL Database exposed through private endpoints. Let's see if our docs highlight anything else. That may be it. I think it is. Yep. Talk about the single database. We talk about the private endpoint through private link, and we talked about our A record. So that's it for the code walkthrough, and we'll see you in the next video.